The story did not open with applause or glamour, but with chaos. Sirens wailed outside a glass mansion, as flashing red and blue lights cut through the night. News anchors shouted breaking updates, their voices trembling with disbelief. A familiar name spilled across every screen. Ava Mercer, once America's sweetheart, now chained to scandal. Reporters whispered, "This isn't gossip. This is a nightmare." A grainy audio leak followed, Ava screaming in desperation, her voice raw. "Please don't take everything from me." The world gasped. Jack Rowe, her longtime manager, barked into his phone, "Control the story before it controls us." Yet control had already vanished. Fans outside the gates cried her name, torn between loyalty and shock. Inside the courtroom, a gavel slammed, and the crowd erupted. Judge Keller's voice thundered, "Silence!" In that moment, the mask of charm shattered, and the truth clawed its way into daylight. Ava Mercer was not only exposed, she was accused of a crime no one imagined she could commit. The world demanded answers, and none came fast enough. Ava Mercer's image, once golden, now burned in headlines beside words like fraud and betrayal. Outside the courthouse, her fans fought each other, divided between believers and critics. A young reporter, Melissa Chen, said, "We watched her climb to the top, and now we watch her fall." Inside, Ava sat in silence, her diamond earrings glinting faintly, reminders of a life slipping away. Jack Rowe leaned close, whispering, "Say nothing, Ava. Silence is your only weapon now." She stared at him, hollow-eyed, wondering if silence was protection or surrender. Cameras captured every flicker of her face, each frame dissected by tabloids. Even the smallest tremble became evidence of guilt. The story was no longer about her talent or beauty. It was about survival. And though the gavel had struck, the real trial was only beginning, one fought not just in court but in the hearts of millions. Whispers filled the hallways like smoke, impossible to contain. Every guard, clerk and bystander carried pieces of Ava's scandal, repeating them until truth and rumor blurred. Reporters shoved microphones at strangers, desperate for fragments. "She was seen at midnight screaming," one muttered. Another insisted, "The money trail points straight to her." Ava's face, projected across news feeds, stared back at itself, frozen mid-tear. Jack Rowe stormed past cameras, shielding her with his body, but his clenched jaw betrayed panic. "She's still my client," he growled at reporters, though his tone hinted doubt. Inside her dressing room, Ava sat before cracked glass, her reflection split in jagged shards. She whispered, "They'll never forgive me." Somewhere outside, the crowd roared her name, half worship, half curse. The air tightened like a noose. Her empire was crumbling not in silence but in the deafening storm of voices that once built her throne. The media storm grew wilder with each passing hour. Helicopters hovered above the mansion, their rotors chopping the night sky. Neighbors stood at fences, recording shaky footage for quick profit. News tickers screamed accusations, faster than lawyers could respond. In one broadcast, an anchor leaned forward and declared, "America's darling is now its disgrace." Ava Mercer stood at the window, curtains drawn tight, watching the world gnaw at her life like vultures at bone. Jack Rowe hissed, "Don't give them a single image, Ava. They'll devour it." Yet, even hidden, her silence spoke louder than words. Fans online dissected her every expression from old interviews, searching for cracks in her perfect mask. In those frames, smiles once adored now seemed sinister. Ava pressed her forehead against the cool glass, eyes shut tight. She whispered, "I don't recognize myself anymore." The storm outside only raged louder, feeding on her fall. The first hearing ended, but the war had just begun. Ava Mercer was escorted out of the courtroom, flashes exploding like lightning strikes. Reporters screamed questions. "Did you lie, Ava? Who betrayed you?" Their voices slicing the air. Jack Rowe shoved microphones aside, shouting, "No comment." Ava lowered her head, shielding her face beneath dark sunglasses, yet the world saw everything. The media force, embodied by relentless journalist Daniel Cruz, sneered. She built her empire on charm. Now we'll see what's left when it burns. His words spread instantly across networks. Ava's heart pounded, but her lips stayed sealed. She thought of her first movie premiere, when crowds cheered instead of jeered. Now those same lights blinded her as daggers. As the car doors slammed and cameras kept flashing, one truth settled deep. The golden image was gone, and the shadow of crime had replaced it. Before the scandal, Ava Mercer was adored beyond measure. She was the face on billboards, the smile that sold dreams, the charm that captivated audiences. She rose from a small-town girl to Hollywood royalty, her beauty radiant, her talent undeniable. Jack Rowe often said, she was lightning in a bottle. Fans adored her vulnerability, critics praised her fire, and directors chased her presence. In interviews, her laughter lit up the room, hiding insecurities buried deep. She wanted love, validation, and a place where her fears could not follow. Her rise felt unstoppable, a fairy tale rewritten in neon lights. Yet, even then, shadows gathered. Her closest ally whispered, "Every empire carries cracks. Ava, yours are just waiting." The audience cheered, but the first seed of betrayal was already rooted. She lived in a palace of applause, unaware the walls were built on fragile glass. Public adored her story, a waitress discovered by chance, transformed into an icon overnight. Ava remembered scrubbing tables, dreaming of stage lights that seemed galaxies away. Then came the audition, the contract, the meteoric rise. Jack Rowe saw her hunger and molded it into stardom. "Fame will eat you alive, but I'll teach you to feed it first," he told her. For a while, she believed him. She bought mansions, wore gowns stitched in gold, and lived like royalty. Yet even in triumph, there was fragility. In quiet moments, she confessed to her friend Elena, "I don't know who I am when the cameras stop." Her laughter was rehearsed, her beauty commodified, her trust easily broken. The dream that carried her upward was also sharpening its claws. The applause was endless, but Ava's heart already ached with shadows she refused to see. Her charm was her weapon, and she wielded it effortlessly. Ava could walk into a room and silence it with a glance, her charisma magnetic, her beauty unshakable. She commanded premieres, dazzling in shimmering gowns, while cameras flashed like lightning. Jack Rowe whispered, "Play the role, Ava. They'll never know the difference." But beneath the sparkle, Ava carried scars of loneliness. Her father's absence haunted her, her mother's warnings echoed. "Don't trust their love. It isn't real." Yet she craved it, each cheer a bandage, each headline a drug. Fans saw perfection, but she only saw fragility. Behind every smile was the fear of fading. Her rise was not just a dream come true. It was a mask fastened so tightly she forgot her own reflection. The love that lifted her was also the rope that would tighten with every secret kept. The world saw perfection, but Ava's inner circle knew the fractures. Elena, her confidant, whispered late at night, "They adore you, but they don't know you." Ava replied softly, "Maybe I don't know me either." Jack Rowe pressed contracts into her hands, promising power and security. Yet each signature chained her tighter to the machine that consumed her. She smiled for magazines, but her diary filled with doubts. "If I stop smiling, will they still care?" she scribbled. The cameras demanded more, the producers pushed harder, and Ava obeyed, afraid of silence. Love became currency, trust became rare, and vulnerability became danger. She lived in a palace of mirrors, where reflection meant survival. For every spotlight that burned on her, a shadow stretched behind her. And in that shadow, betrayal waited patiently, sharpening its edge. At the peak of her fame, Ava Mercer was untouchable, or so the world believed. Her films broke records, her image flooded magazines, her smile was everywhere. Yet her heart remained restless. She longed for something real, a love untainted by fame. When she met Lucas Hale, the charming investor, she thought she found it. "You don't have to be perfect for me," he said, and she clung to his words like lifelines. But the foundation was shaky, built on secrecy and hunger. Friends whispered that Lucas had motives of his own, but Ava silenced them, desperate for trust. She believed she had found safety, but in truth she had opened the first door to betrayal. Fame had given her everything she wanted, yet it was also leading her to everything she feared. Love and doom had become the same thread, pulling tighter each day. The descent began slowly, almost unnoticed. Ava Mercer smiled for cameras while whispers of addiction crept through the tabloids. A glass of wine became two became many. Her laughter at parties grew louder, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Lucas Hale stayed at her side, whispering promises that seemed comforting but carried control. "Trust me, Ava. I'll protect you," he said, even as rumors linked him to shady deals. Jack Rowe urged restraint, but his warnings were drowned by music and applause. Paparazzi snapped her staggering from a limousine, headlines shouting downfall before it began. She thought she could manage both fame and fear, but the cracks widened with each step. The world began to taste blood in the water, and Ava could feel the tide pulling her further into chaos. The tabloids grew hungrier. Every slip, every shadow became a headline. Ava sat in her dressing room, mascara smudged, staring at her phone as cruel comments scrolled endlessly. Elena tried to comfort her, whispering, "You don't need them." Ava shook her head, muttering, "Without them, I'm nothing." Jack Rowe stormed in, furious. "Cancel the interviews before they bury you." Yet, Ava insisted on performing, desperate to keep the illusion alive. On stage, her smile was radiant, but her hands trembled behind the curtain. The cameras captured her beauty, not her breaking. Fans cheered louder than ever, unaware that the woman they adored was unraveling beneath the lights. Behind every encore, Ava's silence deepened. Fame was no longer her crown, it was the chain around her neck. By now, trust was breaking apart. Old friends whispered to reporters, selling fragments of her life for cash. "She hides secrets darker than anyone knows," one claimed. Lucas Hale grew distant, his late-night calls filled with coded business deals. Ava confronted him once, trembling. "Tell me the truth, Lucas." He kissed her hand and said, "You only need to trust me." But his smile no longer reached his eyes. Jack Rowe watched silently, torn between loyalty and survival. Rumors swirled of stolen funds and shadowed investors, each headline slicing deeper. Ava's world, once golden, now cracked like glass under pressure. Even her most private fears were now public property. She clung tighter to Lucas, unaware that trust itself was the poison seeping into her veins. The paparazzi circled like vultures, waiting for blood. One evening, they captured Ava staggering out of a private club, eyes glazed, Lucas absent. The photos spread instantly, her reputation shredding online. Jack Rowe slammed the tabloids on her table. "This is a war you can't win." Ava buried her face in her hands, whispering, "I just wanted to feel alive." Elena pleaded, "Stop, before it destroys you." But the cycle was unstoppable. One night of escape turned into another, each darker than the last. Headlines screamed betrayal, addiction, collapse. Crowds that once adored her now jeered. Ava's perfect mask crumbled piece by piece, and the world devoured her pain like entertainment. The storm she once controlled had now turned to fire, and she was standing in the center, burning. Then came the call that ended everything. Past midnight, Ava sat alone in her mansion, phone glowing in the dark. The voice on the other end was cold, almost cruel. "We know what you did," it said before cutting off. Her breath froze, and the glass slipped from her hand, shattering across marble floor. Jack Rowe rushed in minutes later, finding her pale and shaking. "What happened?" he demanded. Ava whispered, "It's all falling apart." Outside, thunder rolled, lightning splitting the sky. The call was not just a warning, it was the door slamming shut on the life she once knew. In that instant, she realized the truth. The world wasn't simply watching her downfall, it was pushing her toward it. And nothing would ever be the same again. The truth began to seep through cracks Ava could no longer seal. Investigators uncovered financial records, revealing accounts tied to Lucas Hale's name and hers. Jack Rose slammed the files on her desk. "They think you laundered money, Ava." Her voice broke. "I never touched it." But silence offered no protection. Reporters whispered about organized crime connections, while photos showed Lucas shaking hands with dangerous figures. Ava tried to cling to his promises, but doubt spread like poison. "I only wanted to save us," Lucas muttered, avoiding her eyes. For the first time she realized his love was not salvation. It was entrapment. The scandal was no longer about her excess, but a crime larger and darker than anyone imagined. The media erupted as leaked photographs hit the front pages, Lucas Hale laughing with known crime boss Victor Dane. Ava stared at the images, her hands trembling, her voice breaking. "Tell me this isn't true." Lucas smiled faintly, saying, "It's business, Ava, nothing more." But the world saw conspiracy, betrayal, and blood money. Jack Rowe raged, "I'll bury her because of you." Lucas only shrugged, calm under fire. For Ava, the revelation tore the ground beneath her feet. The man she believed was her anchor was the storm itself. She realized too late she had been living inside his scheme, her fame serving as his shield. The twist was merciless. Ava Mercer, the Golden Star, was now painted as the face of crime. Investigators closed in, building a case brick by brick. Detective Marlowe, relentless and sharp-eyed, told the press, "This is bigger than celebrity. It's criminal." Ava watched coverage in silence, rage and fear twisting her heart. Elena confronted her, whispering, "He's destroying you." Ava's reply trembled, "I can't lose him, Elena. Without him, I'm nothing." But the evidence was merciless. Bank statements, calls, secret meetings. Jack Rowe warned, "They'll drag you both down." Lucas pulled her close, whispering, "Stay with me, Ava, and we'll win." Yet his embrace felt like chains. For the first time she saw herself not as victim, but as accomplice in a web too dark to escape. The betrayal spread beyond Lucas. Elena, her closest friend, revealed she had seen him exchange envelopes in hidden meetings. Tears filled Ava's eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elena whispered, "Because you never listen until it's too late." Their friendship cracked in that instant, trust shattered by lies too heavy to carry. Ava realized she was surrounded not by allies, but by enablers and betrayers. Even Jack Rowe confessed, "I knew things weren't clean, but I thought I could shield you." The web of silence closed around her, leaving Ava alone in the center. Fame had not only lifted her, it had blinded her until the mask ripped away. The woman once untouchable was now utterly exposed. The final twist shattered everything. A leaked recording emerged. Ava's voice, frantic, pleading with Lucas. "I can't do this anymore. They'll catch us." Played on every network, it painted her not as victim but as partner. Ava fell to the floor when she heard it, screaming, "That wasn't supposed to exist." The betrayal was complete. Her own words were now evidence. The press roared, the public judged, and investigators tightened their grip. Jack Rowe muttered, "The mask is gone, Ava. This is the truth now." The revelation silenced the world. Ava Mercer, the beloved star, was no longer innocent. She was entangled in a crime deeper than anyone dared imagine. The fall was not scandal. It was conspiracy. The arrest came at dawn. Police stormed Ava Mercer's mansion, cameras already waiting at the gates. She stumbled down marble stairs in silk nightwear as officers shouted commands. "Hands behind your back," an officer barked. Ava's voice cracked. "Please, this is a mistake." Jack Rowe begged, "Don't parade her like this." But the cuffs clicked, and the cameras caught it all. The Golden Star was now an inmate in chains. Reporters screamed questions as she was shoved into the car. The world saw a queen stripped of her crown. Her silence spoke louder than pleas, her face pale and broken. The empire had collapsed, not in silence, but in the violent flash of 1,000 lenses. The courtroom became a theater of ruin. Ava entered in shackles, her eyes hollow, her glamour replaced by exhaustion. The crowd gasped as the once radiant star shuffled to her seat. Judge Keller's voice boomed. "Order!" Prosecutors laid out evidence, secret accounts, recordings, ties to crime syndicates. Each word landed like a hammer. Jack Rowe whispered, "Stay strong," though his own face betrayed defeat. Lucas Hale sat apart, calm and cold, his eyes avoiding hers. Ava whispered to herself, "He promised me love, not ruin." Cameras clicked, capturing every tear, every flinch. The trial was no longer about truth. It was about spectacle, and Ava was the centerpiece. The prosecution unveiled its sharpest weapon, a witness. Elena stepped forward, trembling, eyes downcast. She knew everything. Elena confessed, her voice shaking. Ava gasped, "No, Elena, don't." But the betrayal was sealed. The courtroom murmured like thunder as Elena described late-night calls and envelopes exchanged. Ava's tears streaked her face as she screamed, "You were my sister." Elena broke down, whispering, "I couldn't carry your secrets anymore." The betrayal cut deeper than chains, deeper than headlines. The one person Ava trusted most had become the nail in her coffin. Silence followed, heavy and merciless, as Ava collapsed into her chair. Her world was ending in real time. The trial turned brutal. Prosecutors replayed the leaked tape, Ava's desperate voice echoing across the silent room. "I can't do this anymore," she had said. The jury watched with stone faces, unmoved by tears. Lucas Hale, untouched, smirked faintly, his calm a dagger to her heart. Jack Rowe muttered, "They've already decided." Ava screamed suddenly, "He used me! I'm not the monster here!" The judge banged the gavel. Order in the court. But the damage was done. The media outside pounced, declaring her outburst proof of guilt. Ava had not only lost the trial, she had lost control of her story. Each camera flash outside became another nail in the coffin of her legend. The verdict fell like thunder. "Guilty," the foreman declared. Gasps filled the courtroom, Ava clutching the table as if to stop herself from falling. Judge Keller's voice cut like steel. "Sentenced to 10 years. Cameras exploded in a frenzy outside. Jack Rowe muttered, "Broken." The verdict was not the end. It was only the beginning of her ruin. Ava's eyes searched for Lucas, but he never looked back. Elena wept silently, the cost of her truth too heavy to bear. Ava's empire collapsed in slow motion, her name no longer etched in lights but in headlines of disgrace. The story of Ava Mercer, once golden and adored, ended not with applause, but with a gavel that shattered her world forever. The world moved on, but Ava Mercer's silence echoed in emptiness. Her mansion, once alive with parties and flashing lights, now stood hollow, its windows dark, curtains heavy with dust. Reporters no longer camped outside, yet the echoes of their frenzy lingered in every cracked marble tile. Jack Rowe walked through the abandoned halls once, whispering, "It feels like a tomb." Ava's trophies still glittered faintly in cabinets, but they seemed like mocking relics of a past that could never return. Inside prison walls, Ava stared at gray concrete, her fame stripped, her voice gone unheard. "They loved me, until they hated me," she whispered to herself. For every cheer she once received, silence had replaced it, louder and heavier than any crowd. The empire that once crowned her queen had dissolved into shadows of memory. Prison life stripped Ava Mercer of her glamour. Her cell was narrow, painted in peeling gray, the smell of iron and despair clinging to the air. Each night, she lay on a thin mattress, listening to distant echoes of crying inmates. "This is my stage now," she whispered bitterly. The guards looked at her without recognition. The name that once ruled magazines now reduced to a number, stitched on her uniform. Lucas Hale never visited, not once. Elena's letters went unanswered, guilt too heavy for Ava to face. Jack Rowe came only once, pressing his hand against the cold glass divider. "I'm sorry, Ava," he muttered, voice breaking. She turned away, unable to forgive or be forgiven. Fame had abandoned her, and even love had turned its back. Beyond prison walls, Ava's absence reshaped the world she once dominated. Billboards that once bore her smile now advertised newer, brighter faces. Fans who once screamed her name spoke of her only in whispers, or not at all. At a cafe, a group of young people debated her fall. "She deserved it," one said coldly. Another sighed, "She was just broken." Their voices carried the finality of judgment, unshaken by truth. Elena watched from a distance, guilt etched into her expression, wondering if she had saved Ava or destroyed her. Jack Rowe gave interviews, defending her legacy, but even his words felt thin. Ava Mercer had become a ghost of fame, a warning whispered more than a memory celebrated. The world that once adored her had moved on without mercy. Inside prison, Ava's resolve shifted. The noise of the outside world faded, and in its place came reflection. She read books left by strangers, pages worn with words about redemption, survival, and ruin. At night, she sat at the steel table, scribbling her thoughts into journals. "I am no longer their star. I am only their lesson," she wrote. Other inmates watched her with curiosity, some with pity. She spoke little, her once commanding voice now a whisper. Yet within her silence was a faint spark of defiance. "They cannot erase me completely," she murmured, pressing her pen harder against the page. For the first time, Ava lived without cameras, without applause, and though it felt like death, it was also a twisted kind of freedom. Years passed slowly, each day bleeding into the next. Ava's reflection in the prison mirror grew harsher, her beauty dulled, but her eyes sharper, harder. One day she whispered to her reflection, "I'm still here." Outside, tabloids occasionally printed her name, usually in passing, as if testing if the world still remembered. Jack Rowe aged quickly, his hair white, his career gone, still muttering in interviews. She wasn't all guilty, but she wasn't innocent either. Elena moved far away, her silence proof of a friendship buried in ashes. The world forgot, but Ava never did. She lived not for redemption, not for revenge, but for endurance. Fame had burned her, love had betrayed her, yet she remained. And in that survival, however empty, there was a dark and haunting victory. The courthouse doors opened one last time. Ava Mercer walked out, older, thinner, but unbroken. 10 years had carved shadows into her face, yet her eyes still burned with the faint light of defiance. Reporters whispered, hesitant, unsure if the fallen star was still worth the chase. Flashes erupted anyway, as if the world couldn't resist one final glimpse. She wore no gown, only a plain black coat, her chains traded for silence. "She's free," someone muttered. But freedom was heavier than prison walls. Ava glanced back once, whispering, "That building took everything." The crowd parted, not in adoration but in unease. She wasn't a star anymore. She was a ghost walking among them, carrying the weight of her ruin like a second skin. The mansion she once ruled was sold to strangers. Ava stood outside the iron gates, looking at the windows where parties once glowed. A child played in the yard, unaware of the history buried in those walls. She whispered, "It was never mine." Not really. Memories of laughter, betrayal, and screams flickered like ghosts. Neighbors peeked from windows, whispering rumors as if the scandal had never ended. Ava's reflection glimmered faintly in the glass, fractured by time. For the first time, she realized the place was not her palace, but her prison. Fame had chained her there, love had destroyed her there, and now strangers lived where she had lost herself. Ava turned away, leaving the past behind, though its shadow stretched endlessly across her path. The media still followed, though fewer now. A young journalist, Daniel Cruz's protege, asked, "Do you regret it all?" Ava paused, lips trembling before she whispered, "I regret trusting the wrong people more than I regret myself." The clip spread online, sparking debates that reignited old wounds. Some called her a liar, others victim. Ava sat in a diner afterward, sipping black coffee, staring at faces that once adored her, now filled only with indifference. She muttered to herself, "They'll never see me as human." The waitress didn't recognize her, and in that anonymity was both relief and despair. For Ava Mercer, the war was over, but the scars remained carved into her name forever. Late at night, Ava returned to the cracked mirror she once feared. In her small apartment, the glass reflected a woman no longer defined by beauty or fame. She touched the scars of time on her face, whispering, "They destroyed Ava Mercer, but I'm still here." Her voice was steady, carrying both pain and pride. Outside, the city pulsed with indifferent lights, its noise distant and uncaring. For years, the world had feasted on her fall, yet here she stood, alive. Survival had become her only victory. She realized then that she wasn't destroyed by her enemies, not by Lucas, not by Elena, not by the media. She was destroyed by herself, and somehow she endured even that truth. The final chapter closed not with redemption, but with silence. A journalist wrote, "In the end, she wasn't destroyed by her enemies, she was destroyed by herself." The line echoed across feeds, haunting in its simplicity. Ava walked alone through the rain, city lights blurring around her, her figure fading into the distance. The cameras didn't follow this time. The world had its story, its obsession, its cautionary tale. She vanished into the night, her legend reduced to whispers. Yet somewhere deep within her silence, a final twist lingered. The world thought her story had ended, but Ava knew otherwise. Her ruin was only the beginning of something darker. She smiled faintly, whispering, "They'll never know the whole truth." And then she was gone.